Hi, this is Mr. Evans. This video is looking at a question that is about Greiner's model of growth. It's not explicitly stated in the question, and you can bring in other models to help you. The question is, discuss the extent to which it is inevitable that a fast-growing business will experience crises because of their expansion. So, you should recognise that this is about Greiner, because Greiner's model is all about growing businesses and the different crises that they experience as they grow in size. Just to remind you about what a top-level answer will do, you'll have a depth and range of knowledge. You're going to demonstrate analysis throughout your answer, which is developed and applied to the context. In this question, here's the context. It's a fast-growing business. And you're going to make judgments or provide solutions built effectively on analysis, showing balance, and having a clear focus on the question throughout. As usual, you'll get the most out of this video if you just think about how you would answer the question. Maybe just pause the video, write down a couple of things that you would say if this was a question that you were answering. And here's my answer to the question. You can see that I have thought about what I want to say before I start, and this is how I've tried to answer the question. Greiner's model of growth provides a simplistic explanation of why many growing businesses will face some crises because of their expansion. The first of these is how, in a small business, they may have a power culture where the leader can be involved in making every decision. The business is small and able to be creative and responsive to changes in demand. However, as the business grows, there is a crisis as it becomes more difficult for the leader to be involved in every decision, and systems need to be put in place to manage the growing complexity of the business. More of a role culture will start to emerge where people have specific jobs, which in itself leads to another crisis of autonomy, where workers lack clear strategic direction. Okay, so what I've done is I've spotted that this is a question about Greiner, and I've talked about the first couple of stages of Greiner's model and the two different crises, the crisis of leadership and the crisis of autonomy. Now, I could go on and describe the whole of Greiner's model, but I don't think that's particularly helpful in answering the question whether it's inevitable that fast-growing businesses will experience crises because of their expansion. So I'm not going to describe the whole of Greiner's model. The other thing I've done, of course, in here is I've incorporated Handy's different cultures and explained how the culture might change. Where is it? I've talked about having a power culture where one person is the guiding light of the business, if you will, and then as the business grows, it's likely to have more of a role culture where people have specific jobs. So I've tried to link business growth to changing culture as well. I haven't done it explicitly, I've done it implicitly. So just to continue, the point of Greiner's model is that as a business grows, it will follow a pattern of hitting a crisis point where new systems need to be put into place, and those new systems themselves lead to a crisis. Whilst we do see many of these crises playing out in real businesses, for example, Marks and Spencer's have been identified as having an overly bureaucratic culture, symbolic of a red tape crisis, it is perhaps too simplistic to say that every company will experience such crises, and it's the role of management and leadership to foresee these issues and put systems into place to prevent them before they occur. So what I've done in this paragraph is I've explained why business may experience some crises, and I've explained some of the theoretical crises that Greiner identifies, and I've tried to link back to the question at the end by saying perhaps it's too simplistic to say that perhaps I should say fast growing here, just to put it a bit more in the context of the business, will experience such crises, and it is the role of good management and leadership to foresee these issues. Okay, so hopefully you can see how I've developed a point about Greiner's model and then linked back to the question by saying it's not inevitable that every fast-growing business will experience these crises because good management can prevent them. Diseconomies of scale can also cause a crisis in a growing business. As the business increases in size, it becomes more difficult to communicate with staff and therefore properly coordinate them in order to achieve the company's corporate objectives. This ties in with Greiner's control crisis. So I've talked about, the other thing to talk about in an essay on business growth often will be economies and diseconomies of scale. So I've tried to put this in here, and I've tied it in with Greiner, mentioning some specific diseconomies and then saying how that could lead to Greiner's control crisis. As a result of diseconomies of scale occurring, average costs of production rise, which could be associated with a crisis if the increased costs exceeded an organisation's revenues. All right, so I've explained what diseconomies of scale are, the average production cost rising, and it would definitely be a crisis if the increased costs as a result of expansion exceeded an organisation's revenues. So in that paragraph, I've basically tried to explain how diseconomies of scale could lead to a crisis. Perhaps I could have linked it back to the question rather better at the end by making some sort of statement about whether or not this would be inevitable. Okay, so maybe not the best paragraph I've ever written in my life. A link back to the question might have been better there. Okay, so now I need to put across the other argument, which is that basically it's not inevitable that fast-growing businesses are going to experience crises. On the other hand, economies of scale demonstrate that organisations can grow in size without experiencing crises, as long as the growth of an organisation is proactively managed through a programme of strategic view and evaluation, such as management undertaking regular SWOT analyses. Systems can be put into place to ensure that growth is beneficial. For example, a rapidly growing business in the technological sector may find it has put too many systems in place for monitoring, and employees find that their creativity is being stifled by too many rules. In this case, a proactive management team could take steps to delay the structure and increase delegation to motivate employees and encourage them to be creative, which would be essential in high-tech industries. So I've tried to get in a bit of context here, which is, and I've tried to link it to one of Greiner's crises, the red tape crisis that I mentioned before, where there's too many rules. And I've said how a management team could take steps to prevent this from happening in the first place, which would be essential. Okay, I was running out of time at this point, but hopefully I've answered the question as to whether or not it's going to be inevitable. What I'm trying to tell the examiner here is that a proactive management team can prevent these crises before they happen, and therefore they're not inevitable. In conclusion, I do not think it's inevitable that a fast-growing business will face crises due to its expansion. This is because a proactive management team would conduct regular appraisals of the business strengths and weaknesses as part of its strategic planning process and put systems in place to manage the organisation's growth. The biggest problems occur in growing businesses due to diseconomies of scale leading to communication problems, which prevent senior management teams from knowing what's going on. Therefore, having flat structures and good communication systems can help prevent managers becoming distant from the day-to-day running of the organisation, and therefore help to prevent crises before they occur. So, what have I done in my conclusion? Well, I've tried to answer the question outright. It's not inevitable, and I've explained why a proactive management team could prevent it. I've tried to include some balance by saying what the biggest problems in a growing business are in terms of when they're growing, and just provide a solution to that problem of the diseconomy of scale that I identify as communication problems, and I've tried to provide a solution to that problem. How does that tie in with what a top-level answer does? You make a judgment or provide solutions are built effectively on analysis, and hopefully that you can see that in my conclusion I've got a judgment, I've got some balance, and I've got a solution to the question, hopefully with a clear focus on the context of the question, which is fast-growing businesses.